In this lesson, I want to show you some professional tips on how to get the best possible results you can from your editing software. If you want to print this image, work for a client, or you want to basically use it for your portfolio images, how to go the extra mile to get the best possible results you can from your landscape, travel, or nature photography. So in the editing software, we want to make sure we're under the processing and image folder, and you're going to find inside of this folder 3 different images. The reason being is because when I was out in the field, I didn't know how bright these lights were going to be in post-production. So this is exposure bracketing, which we're about to get on in future lessons on how to blend multiple images together. But using this singular image, we're going to get all the information back that we require. The simple way you can go through this is basically what we've done under the dynamic range exposing to the right. So I can go to the highlights, and reduce this all the way down. But you're going to see under the highlights, little bit funny things going on. But remember, we can get more information back from the shadows than we can the highlights. I know you're gonna get me sick of me saying that, but it is so important. That is why I've used the middle exposure for this. So the darkest one is way too dark. So we want to use the middle one for this situation. So sometimes it's best to use this exposure bracketing if you're in a location that you cannot revisit. So for me, I was traveling and I was never going to go back to this location. So now we can just reduce those highlights a little bit and then bump up the shadows quite a lot. So what I'm actually going to do here is, because I've got the shadows all the way up and it's still not working for me, I'm actually going to just roll this exposure to 0.5. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, why couldn't you go to this image? And this is +1 EV. So I could go minus 0.5 here and roll it back that way. Why wouldn't you do that? Because I said to you, out in the field, we can get more information back from our shadows than we can the highlights. The same goes with exposure. We don't want to underexpose the image in post-production. We would rather increase the exposure and down the highlights. That's why I wanted to shoot 3 exposures, so I had these images to play around with. Okay, so that's the most important value here. So we're going to go into here and now reduce this by 75 if we have to, and therefore you're going to see I don't have to reduce my shadows as much. That's a pretty cool tip. When exposure bracketing, you can actually use the value under, increase the exposure a half of stop, reduce the highlights and increase the shadows not as much. So the whites now you can see on the histogram, we haven't got as much information there, so we don't want to go too much here, so let's keep it at 30. We can always come back and change that just a little bit. Now blacks, I've got the option here to just increase the blacks or make it really moody, but I'm going to make this image super moody at the end of this. So I'm actually going to introduce the blacks as a positive right now. Let's go around 2020, I think. And we can always come back and change it from there. Dehaze, I don't want to add too much in here, so I'm going to just leave this around 8 for now. Clarity, texture, contrast, we're going to come back to, because we're going to see that is crazy what contrast is going to do into this image. So it's very important to understand contrast and what it is doing. So I can tell right now this image is missing contrast, but that's because I've increased the blacks and highlights and shadows so much. Highlights just up, and let's do the lights. No, I'm going the other way around. More punch into the image. I really want to make sure this is like, a staircase to hell, basically. I want to make this a really moody image. That's what I'm trying to go for here. The darks, I'm actually going to reduce the darks a little bit and increase the shadows. No, I'm going to go all the way around again. It's not going to work the way I wanted it to. So right now I don't want to go too far on this overall. So I'm just going to roll these back just a little bit. Okay, so I'm happy with that there. Now the hue, saturation and luminance, this comes down to personal taste once again. So I'm actually going to leave the saturation and luminance right now. The hue, I just want to see if I can change to make this not that red, but just a little bit red. So just turn that on and off. It was a little bit too orange for me, and it was, much better. It was definitely red in real life. It was almost like that stairway to hell, once again. Highlights, we could almost go to this highlights for the red here. So basically I could have basically left this at 0, 0 and just introduced the red here. So around that 10 or 0, I actually quite like that better. So we're going to leave it there. So you can always see, I can always go back to the change that I made and make adjustments this way. So very powerful. Now I can see it's introduced the red into here. Doesn't matter, we can go through and make local adjustments to get rid of that, or you may even like that. It's totally up to you. The shadows, this is something that's going to be interesting to see what we like in the shadows. So there it does look quite natural, quite nice. I just want to know if it's going to give us that crazy feeling to it or not. Let's try that now. We can always come back and make the adjustments. Toggle off and on. It's just gotten rid of that green there, which I quite like. Let's go to 225. 225 I wanted that green. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what I like here. Whether I want something really crazy. Let's just carry that 215 value for now. We can always come back and change those there. Just drop this value back just a little bit. Also, now detail. This is going to be super easy because obviously we've got everything that needs to be sharpened in this image, but I still want to make sure I'm going through and choose the mask because yes, see how it's black on the left hand side and right hand side and also into the tunnel. This is good because it's not going to introduce noise. Because if I just left this at 0, yes it will sharpen everything, but let's just jump up to, it's going to be really hard to see, but let's just go sharpening way too much. So see this area affected here. Okay, this is noise being introduced into the image. Now if we mask this image, or let's just go back out, and look at the same area on the left hand side, see how it's not applying as much sharpening to that image. Let's go back to that area now. See how it's not as grainy. Okay, so masking, huge difference. You might do this on your screen to see the full difference, but because of this masking now, it's getting rid of that noise and only applying the sharpening to where it needs to be. So these areas here need to be sharp, want them as sharp as possible. But we're going to just reduce this sharpening all the way back and keep this mask around that 50 value, okay? So much better for me. That's really good job, easy to sharpen for this image. Noise reduction, I like to just sometimes add a little bit in, especially this was shot on an older camera, so we want to make sure, but still shot at ISO 200, so we're absolutely fine. Now, you're probably thinking, that is amazing, that image is done. No, it's not. I want to go through and chisel out what we call dodge and burning. Dodge and burning is basically already applied on this image. It's highlights and shadows, but what we're going to do here is make those stand out. So we want to go to this adjustment brush right here. Now, you're going to see these effects, and it's got custom. You're actually going to see burn, darken, dodge, lighten. These are already inbuilt into the software, presets made. Let's go burn, minus 0.3. Now, for me personally, I like to go -1. I like to overdo things so much to see where I've done the area. Yes, I can go show selected mask overlay, but if I just quickly go through and do some things now, so I'm just going to quickly go through here and do that. If I click that, it's red. It's red on red. I can't tell as much where I've been, so I want to go through and make it way too much. So what I'm going to do right now is just speed up this video. I'm going to go through and darken this entire top section here. And I'm going to show you the before and after once I've done everything that I need to do. Okay, so that is me going through and burning the image. Now you're probably thinking, Matt, what have you just done to that image? I know, don't worry, it is way too overdone, but you can see I've just went through and wherever it's dark, I've tried to paint on, okay? So this is going to make a lot more sense when I go through and show you at -0.3. Okay, so we can go through and just even burn all this area in here just to emphasize the highlights and shadows inside certain areas. So just quickly doing areas that I forgot here. Okay, so let's go back out and go to minus 0.1. Okay, so this is just the burning side of this. So I can click back on this now and go through, and might have to reduce it just a little bit more and go through it and just toggle this off and on. So 0.1 is actually quite good. So you can see this is just the burning, and all I went through and done was just emphasize all those shadows, because that's what I was missing with the, so just going to show you now. So where all those shadows are, that's basically what I was missing with the contrast out of the image. Now we have to go through and do exactly the same, but with the light now. So obviously we went through and done the burning. Now we have to do dodging. So basically have to go through, and I'm just following this simple steps of, I'm just going to 100% show you. See how this, I'm going to drag it right up to show you again. See how this passage here is just quite bright. I'm actually just following this. So it's nothing actually special that I'm doing. So just see here, brighten, brighten. I normally do this with a pen, so with a graphic tablet pen, because it's also pressure sensitive. So we can just go through and just everywhere where it's a little bit brighter than where it's darker, we just want to paint in. This could take you 5 hours, 1 hour, 10 minutes, however long you want to spend. But I can guarantee you, the longer you spend on this, the better the effect will be. Obviously without going too dark. Now up here, see how the bottom part was a lot brighter, but if we just brighten this section here, it becomes really bright. But if I just go on here and show you 0.15, it's only affecting 0.15 to the percentage of light underneath. So that's very important to remember. So where it's brighter underneath, so down here, it's going to affect this area a lot more than it is this area, because this area was darker originally. Okay, so very important to remember that. So we can just go to 0.2 now and just continue on following our passage all the way around. Is what I'm trying to do here. So very simply, just going through and painting in where it is bright. Okay, so that is the lightning done. So we just go back to this node here. I'm just going to toggle this off and on. Look at the impact that is making through this top section here. So we could go through it and reduce that the same as the darkening. So 0.15 I think I left it at. And once again here, just going through, want to go onto this node and just have a look at the darken also. So we can just toggle that. So that is crazy amount of difference what that is doing. But I just want to show you down this section here that this looks very flat. So what I want to do, I could basically go through and just paint this area in here. And then the most important thing I can say with this is don't just use the same brush size over the whole entire thing. Sometimes I want to use a big brush and darken here, and then a really small brush just to get these little nooks and crannies in here. Okay, so I really want to keep trying to change up the brush size and not to use the same brush size. That's sort of the key aspect in this. And it really depends how much you want to go, because you can even go through and, you know, darken this area here. There's so much you can go through and darken, especially obviously on this photo where you've got really big contrast difference. But see this area here, I can just go through, darken this, here. Just do small little changes to the entire image. And it's really going to make things pop and raise the obviously overall image in. So it's really going to define things. Like I said, you can go through here for hours and hours if you wanted to. So for me, when I have a portfolio image or an image that I want to print, this definitely comes into play. Last thing I want to do is just add a graduated filter in and try and neutralize this color down the bottom here. And also I was going to add in just a little bit of spice to the image by brightening it up, but also I want to just try and remove this color cast down here. As far as, let's try and go 3, 5 and 5. 5 looks pretty good. So 3 and 5. Okay. And with that bottom section, I'm also just going to make this try and stand out. So I'm going to reduce the shadows. Pretty cool overall image. So you can see the amount it's chiseled out. If I go to this side-by-side comparison, look at this top section. Dodging and burning is crazy what you can do. So this is extremely, extremely important. Now we could go a little bit further also and add in some contrast. It's going to give us just that little bit more touch out of the overall image. Once again, come down, add a little bit of vibrance. The colors in here are already quite vibrant. And then just have a look what clarity is doing. Crazy amount. So 6 in that one, I think, maybe even 4, a little bit lower. One small step I want to make is just going back and reducing that white a little bit. And now we've got a bloody good overall image, an image that I'd be happy to print, happy to sell to a client, and also put in my portfolio and display this beautiful image. So dodging and burning. Allocate half an hour, spend half an hour dodging and burning. This took me about 45 minutes to edit this image and about half an hour just to dodging and burning. And I could go through and do this even more, especially if I had my graphic tablet here, pressure sensitive. It's amazing what dodging and burning can do. So please download this image, edit this image, and then spend some time dodging and burning and understand the power of it. What I really recommend to do inside the image is just do half of the image. So the left-hand side, dodge and burn. The right-hand side, just leave it, and you're going to see an amazing difference in between dodging and burning. Now I want to go into a few specialized things on how to blend HDR images and also how to stitch pattern. In this lesson, we're going to have a look at how to focus stack our images in post-production. When we're out in the field, I explained to you, we didn't get the greatest depth of field by shooting at f8, focusing on a foreground element and also focusing on the background element. We don't want to jump to f22 because we're going to get negative effects as far as comma and also diffractions. Yes, we get a really large depth of field and everything in focus, but remember, when we take our images, we want the best possible results we can. And focus stacking, we've already worked out in the field, joining 2 f8 images together, so using aperture of f8 to get the greatest depth of field is better than using f22. But now in post-production, I want to show you exactly how to take those images off the camera into post-production and blend them together using Adobe Lightroom and Adobe Photoshop. So under the editing software, we want to make sure we're in the focus stacking module. We're going to go over to the develop module. Now the same procedure I've used here, putting my finger inside the composition to show where I was in focus. So out in the field, I used 3 images, but for this one, I also used 3 images, but I found that I pointed to these rocks and also these mountains, but I found out that I only need to use 2 images. So as I said out in the field, once again, it's better to overshoot than undershoot for focus stacking. So now I only need to blend 2 images together. What we're going to do is use presets for this one of editing. It's going to speed up my workflow amazingly, and I'm going to show you exactly how. So on the left-hand side here on Develop module, I have all these presets already made. And basically what a preset is saving information that I've done on previous photos, referencing them for future images like we're going to do right now. So I'm going to use the Arctic Explorer preset. I'm going to just click on that, and you're going to see on the right hand side now, it's going to make all these changes. So everything is now edited. It is that simple to do. A preset saves you so much time, especially if you've just been on holidays and you come back and you've got very similar climates. So I'm going to go through and just do masking on this. This is what you have to do on all your presets. And also I'm going to just put in a filter because we want to make sure we've got some local adjustments. I recommend if you do make presets not to make local adjustments because this is going to change obviously for every image. I only make global adjustments and then go from there. So let's go to -50 for this one. And I'm just going to bring down the overall exposure globally for this one. So now let's just go to 0.25. Let's even try back to 0. I think that's much nicer. I'm going to drop this value back also because I want it to be a little bit cooler. Now I've made that overall image and I'm pretty happy with that overall. So I can hold control and click the other photo. So this has got my finger in it. This is the other one. I can go down here and go sync, or I can go right click on the main image. I can go develop settings, and then from here I can go sync settings. Exactly the same way. We want to make sure everything is clicked. Now if you're just doing sharpening or brush, graduated filters, whatever, you can basically go check none, and then I can just select one obviously. But for this one, we want to select all. Synchronize top left, pasting settings. They are now exactly the same, which is absolutely fantastic. The reason we want it to be exactly the same is because in a minute, these are going to be the same image, just focus text. We're going to right click, we're going to go edit in Adobe Photoshop. We can edit these in a different software also, which I'm going to take you through quickly, a thing called Helican Focus. Unfortunately, Lightroom will not do focus stacking for us. Okay, so we now have both images imported into Adobe Photoshop. They are still separate images and we need to blend these images together. What I want to do is just click the first image and I want to find out what is the foreground and what is the background. So hold down spacebar, right click to 200%, continue to hold spacebar. Yes, the foreground is in focus and the background is out of focus. We've got a longest shutter speed from a human movement there. So what we're going to do is just unclick this little lock here, double click layer 0, and I'm just going to rename this foreground. Because what I'm going to do in a second is bring the second image across to this image. And once you put it on top of each other, they're going to look identical and be very difficult to tell what is what. On the second image, I want to make sure to unclick the lock again. I'm going to name this background and it'll make our workflow so much easier. So now I want to go Control A to select all, Control Copy to copy all, Control W to close this window. Don't want to save changes, and Control V to paste over top. Once again, we just need to name this background because it didn't bring it over with us. Now I want to hold down Control and select both images. From here, we want to go to Edit, Auto Align Layers, and keep it on auto because we've just moved the focusing point just a little bit. This composition will not be exact. So every time we blend an image together, whether it's HDR, whether it's panoramics, whatever it is, joining two images together, we always want to auto align our layers. So auto, Photoshop does a great job, and just click OK. I'm going to show you right now by adding 200% and just going to the corner, and you can see right here, let's go to a darker area, see that? Just the tiniest bit is gone from the corner. So extremely important to make sure we do that auto align. Or they're both still selected, go back into edit. We want to go auto blend layers. Here you're going to find panorama. We're not going to use panoramic stitching in Adobe. We're going to use that in Lightroom. It's had an update and it's absolutely fantastic. We want to stack images. So focus, stack images, and click OK. So from here it's going to do its magic. It's absolutely amazing what Photoshop can do. It's going to find what's in focus, what isn't in focus, and blend those together by making masks, which we're going to find out in just a second. So almost finished. And you see on the right hand side now, it's loaded here. And I told you in the last lesson that everything that is black is not in focus, everything that white is in focus. So from this image right now, if I toggle that off, you can see that this here is in focus. Now we add that, we jump up to 100% and go over the entire image. Our entire image now is in focus. So it is that simple to blend images together. We've got a sharp background, which is what we're after from one image, and a really sharp foreground, which is from another image. That is absolutely fantastic. So that is the way that we could edit those images. Now here you can see background merged, so that's the overall merged image. The last thing I'd go through here is get rid of these people to take them out of our landscape image. That is how you do it, and you can just save the image from there, bring it back into Lightroom and do further alterations if you wanted to. But right now I want to show you through another software that you have to pay for, but it's very, very good if you want to do focus stacking all the time. So back in Lightroom, hold down Control, selecting both of them. When I right click, and here you want to go to Export. Helicon Focus. You won't see Helicon Focus if you haven't got it, but you can go through and do a 30-day free trial of Helicon Focus. We're going to export these into Helicon Focus. So imported into Helicon Focus, you can see both images are imported here under TIFF files. TIFF files are very, very big files that are uncompressed, and this is what we want to be working in. So a very simple platform only designed for focus stacking. At the top here it's got a few panels, but we just simply want to click render. And you're going to see on the right hand side it's going to blend those two images together. So left hand side is the image, right hand side is the image that is edited. So we can now go through here and boost this up just a little bit to show everyone what it's doing. Let's go to around 200%. And if we click the left hand side image is the foreground now, and you're going to see if I hold down spacebar, the bottom is exactly the same, but when I go to the top, the left hand side is out of focus and the right hand side is in focus. But if I click the one underneath, you've now got that image on either side, but the foreground on the left is not in focus. So that is Helicon Focus. Extremely, extremely simple. If you are just editing two images together, so only stacking two images together like we've just done, I recommend using Photoshop. But if you are going to 3, 4, 5, even 7 images, sometimes I've done flowers in the foreground and mountains in the background. It's around 7 to 9 images. Helicon Focus is so much better. So if you are interested in doing a lot of focus stacking in your photography of 3+ images, I highly recommend to look in something like Helicon Focus or another software out there that does focus stacking. It will save your time so much. At the top here, there's another panel called Retouching, and we're going to go into the same screen. So once again, we can go up to 200%, and what I'm going to do here now is actually go the opposite way. I'm going to go out of focus. So on the left-hand side now, we have got the out of focus rock you can see just here. But if I go to this screen, I'm going to make the brush size a little bit smaller. Now I can just, let's go to the mountain at the top actually, so it's a little bit more visible to everyone. So we can see on the left hand side that these rocks here are out of focus and these rocks are in focus. But if I just put my cursor over top, you can see things are going out of focus. So I can actually just paint this in, and it's actually becoming out of focus now. But obviously, if we were the other way around where I wanted this to be in focus, so right now I can select the other image, and now I can paint this in, and it's going to be in focus. So if Helicon Focus didn't do the job that you desired, you can go through and manually paint it in from 1, 2, 5, 7 images. So if you are editing with 7 images, you can go through and choose the specific image from Helicon Focus and blend that into the overall image. It saves your time so much for that. As I said, you can get a 30-day free trial for that software to try it out if you are interested before making the purchase. But if you do have Adobe Photoshop, it does do a fantastic job. Now let's move on to a very quick lesson on how to remove color cast. Long exposure photography, a beautiful type of photography, and I said to you we can only achieve this out in the field by using filters. But one negative thing when using cheaper filters or filters that are also expensive, we do get something called color cast. Now, we can manipulate this in post-production if we shoot in that raw format. Now, I want to really quickly show you how, from information that we already know in our post-production or editing software, how to remove that color cast. It's very simple, very effective, and let's go through and do it right now. So you can see on the left hand side we've got the introduction of color cast. The right hand side has no filter on there whatsoever. But we also have to remember, if we zoom up to where the water is, I can only achieve this effect in camera. Okay, so we can't achieve this effect in post-production. So yes, we introduce color cast into the overall image, but we cannot get this effect in camera. So selecting the image that has the color cast introduced, we shot in RAW, I can go over to the white balance and I can very simply from here go to automatic and see what it does. And you can see straight away it gets rid of that color cast. It is so simple to remove that color cast. Now sometimes it will introduce a funny color. So we could actually go through and remove color or selectively change the color the way we wanted to. The way we can do this in Lightroom and most software is through the hue. So I can go through here and basically, as I said to you, click on the yellow and make it more color of what I am after. Okay, so in this situation it was too yellow. I can go through and make it more blue. It is very simple to get rid of that color cast if we needed to. Once again, that split toning, because we introduced that that yellow into the image, we want to introduce the negative color. So the negative color on the other side of the spectrum is blue. So I'm just going to get rid of this hue. So let's just basically hold Alt, reset that. And now I'm going to, in the highlights, introduce 225 because that is blue, and 12. And it's negated that color cast even more. It is that simple. So if I went to 50 and introduced yellow, you can see that color cast is coming back. 225, we're negating that color cast. Once again, shadows, I can introduce 80, so around that green value, introduce 12, and it's introducing that color cast. But 225 is negating that color cast once again. Very simple to go through in post-production and get rid of color cast. So yes, out in the field we introduce a negative color into the overall image, but that is another reason why we need to shoot on RAW for our landscape and nature photography. Bring it into post-production and separate those colors even further. There are softwares out there that you can basically just get one particular color and just concentrate on that color to reduce how much you want of that color and how much you don't. But the easiest way inside of Lightroom and most software is through white balance, split toning, the very powerful feature of split toning, and then separation of hues. It is very simple, and don't worry about wasting time in post-production. Getting rid of that color cast, make sure to get the perfect image out in the field with a filter on. Previously inside this course, we've discussed the benefits of exposing to the right and also dynamic range inside of a camera. This was when we were doing single exposure at the cave. But then later inside this course, we went back to the same cave and exposure bracketed, so multiple exposures to catch the highlights and shadows over 3 images. So previously we were talking about 1 image, then we went back and looked at the advantage of shooting with 3 images. So for the shadows, it was +2 on the EV, and for the highlights, it was +0.3. So we captured 3 images at 0 EV, 1 EV, and +2 EV. But this, once again, is 3 images that aren't joined together. So I'm going to show you how to blend what we call HDR images in post-production. It is very similar in post-production inside of Lightroom than it is in other softwares. Very simple and very time effective. So inside of the formula, we want to go through and get the HDR folder. You're going to see these images right now. So here, basically a single exposed image, exposing to the right, still quite dark in the highlights. This one here is really protected for the overall image. So you can see right and left, it's got a spike. So this here is right in the middle. This one here is exposed for the shadows. So you can see on the left-hand side, we're not clipping anymore, but on the right-hand side, we are extremely clipping on the right-hand side. So now I don't want to use all 3 images. I want to use this image for the shadows and this image here for the highlights. How are we going to do that? Okay, so right now I want to make a few alterations in dropping the highlights and in here increasing the shadows and dropping the highlights. Okay, so let's just do -50, +50, and on this one the same, -50 and +50. So you want to hold down Control and get the darkest one and the brightest one, right click, and we want to go Photo Merge HDR. And this is going to build us a preview for that image. Now, this is crazy what it is doing. Look at the highlights, look at the shadows. It's basically making an overall image. So we're going to click Merge for this image, and you can see right now it's going to make another PSD. So this is what we call a RAW file, so a raw image for Fujifilm, and a PSD is basically for Photoshop's version of a raw image. So when we click on this, it's got DNG is for Adobe. So DNG means we can still go through and edit this a lot. Okay, so I can go through and edit this basically as much as I can for a raw image. So you can see right now how much information I can go through and continue to make all these changes on. It's incredible. So we've basically got a single image here that's exposed for the highlights and shadows. And see how it becomes very flat. Then we look at this image here, two blend together, one for the highlights, one for the shadows. It's still got all that contrast, which is exactly what we are after. So we can go through once again and just edit this like a normal photo if we wanted to, and really protect those shadows and highlights, and just continue on from there. So you can see the histogram right now. Not clipping on the shadows too much, and not clipping on the highlights at all, which is great. So you can see the benefit right now of exposure blending. Okay, this might only work 0.5 of the stop in the shadows, 0.5 in the highlights, but that is just enough information to get a perfect histogram back. We have to understand this cave is extremely dark, so the histogram should be leaned to the left-hand side a little bit. We can go through and make all these alterations as far as we wanted, or we can apply a preset. We can literally do whatever we wanted to this overall image to get back what we needed, because now we've got all the information that we need to get from this image, which is absolutely perfect. So you can see the benefit right now of exposure blending. It gives us a little bit more detail, and it's so simple in post-production to blend those images together, get the most detail we can. Now just remember, it's so important to go out and test the dynamic range of your camera, to go out and see how much shadows and highlights you can get out of this, because you might be reading your histogram and think it's absolutely perfect, but when you bring it back into post-production in a single image, you might introduce too much noise. Therefore, you have to blend images together. So make sure to go out and learn dynamic range, edit those images to understand how much your camera can handle, then find out the threshold of when you have to exposure, blend, or take multiple exposures out in the field. There's no good being out in the field and just capturing multiple exposures all the time. Try and have some effort out in the field and get a single exposure if you possibly can. Now we're going to move on to the last lesson in this editing module of how to stitch a panorama. In this lesson, we're going to finally finish off one of my favorite types of photography in landscape and nature photography, how to blend panoramic images together in post-production. Remember, out in the field, we had a few key elements on leveling our tripod, then leveling our camera, making sure we've got 33% overlap from one image to another. Right now, we're going to find out how good a job we've done out in the field to see if it was level, enough overlap to see if the images actually join together. So inside, we want to go through to the panoramic folder. There should be 5 images in there, and head over to the develop module. Now inside this image, you can see I have got a dust spot on my sensor on my camera. Because it's a panoramic, we're going to join these images together. We could go through and do this to all the images before we start to get rid of that spot. But right now I'm not. I'm going to leave that and select all these images. I'm going to hold Shift and click the last image, and it's going to select all the images inside this folder. We're going to right click now, and then we're going to go to Photo Merge. Instead of HDR from the last lesson, we're going to Panoramic, and it's going to do its wonders once again and stitch these images together. If we've got a level enough tripod out in the field, and also we've had that enough overlap. So here is our panoramic stitch together. Now I want to take you through on the right hand side here 3 different modes: spherical, cylindrical, and perspective. Now perspective is going to work well in situations like this because we have got a level tripod. Because of that neck that I've replaced for my tripod, it's going to give the great depth of field into the image. Cylindrical is really good if you've got multiple row exposures. So top and bottom works really well for this. So really large panoramics. Cylindrical is for really long panoramics, say like 7, 9 images. But the best thing to go through here is sometimes 2 of these work and perspective doesn't. So 9 times out of 10, if I shoot 3 or 5 images, I'll use perspective for this. Now we can just click these off, so auto crop and auto settings. So this white around the border here is going to tell us how good of a job we done. If you have a big loop going through here, this means your tripod was not level, okay? So it's either going to be a big loop through here or it's going to go down on a slant. It means it wasn't level. So that means you need to spend more time out in the field than you do in post-production because you're going to lose so much of this image. So right now, I can go through and crop this as much as I want, where if you had that slope, you are limited to where you can crop. We can click here, fill edges, and it's going to fill all these white gaps in. But remember, this is 5 images joined together. It is absolutely huge. We're going to go auto crop. I'm going to crop even further than this. Auto settings, we're going to click and accept that. We're going to do further alterations to this also. We're going to click merge right now. So once again, the software is going to make a Pano DNG. So we can go through and edit this and you've got all the 5 images separately once again. So this is quite a big file right now. You can see 10,275 by 6,240, absolutely massive 5 images joined together. So I want to click crop. I'm going to actually do that. Unlock here. I'm going to move this to where I want to. That's why I didn't want to get rid of those dust spots right now because I knew I was going to crop in anyway. So I'm going to crop it in about there. I want to go back and get my constraint to crop, and also I want to keep those rule of thirds. Let's leave it around that aspect right there. Done. Okay, so that is our crop image done. You can see the benefit of going with a panoramic. So I'm just going to reduce this down to 0, bump the shadows. I think I went a little bit too white on here, so we're going to have to remove those highlights, I think, in a local adjustment. And you can see all the beautiful cows and everything in the foreground. Very, very sharp. So if we did just shoot this in a panoramic mode on our camera, we would only get 26 megapixels on a panoramic. Now I've got about 100 megapixel image to play around with. So you can tell it is extremely sharp all the way through. Now we could go through and edit this as a normal image. So nothing here changes. We can go through and just edit it as we normally would for any old image. So I'm not going to actually go through and edit this image, but we can go through, or you can go through on your editing software and edit this image as far as you wanted, because you're going to understand that when you've got an image this big, it's going to take a lot more effort to edit this, and I'm obviously almost screen recording at the same time, so it's going to take a long time to edit. But that now is a panoramic joined together. You can see there's quite a bit of blue in there. Once again, we can go through split toning and add that in there. So around that 65, we've run the green back, 50 if we wanted it. So you can go through and adjust it as much as you want. But that is the power of panoramic. I love it out in the field. It takes a lot more effort, a lot more time. But you can see once we get into post-production, it is very artistic. Set yourself away as a photographer to go to location, catch a really big image, especially if you print that image. That is us done now for the editing module. I thank you very much for your patience, effort. Inside this, I know there's a lot to learn for editing, and that is why I want to say if you are having trouble or if you don't understand something I've talked about, please don't be afraid to contact me, reach out, and I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can. I understand post-production is difficult, and there's 100 different ways to do editing inside of all your software. So if you do contact me about something or do with software, please let me know what image you're stuck on and also what editing software you are using. Also, please remember, I've spent a lot of time into getting these raw images. Please only use them for the course. Please do not resell them, give it to an agency, or use them for personal use. It's only for the course. But I thank you very much for purchasing this course. I really appreciate it. I hope you've learned everything that you need to learn out of this landscape and nature photography course. Thank you for supporting me. I extremely appreciate it, and I hope I've given you the time of day to teach you everything that you've always wanted.